Hey guys, welcome back. It's Rap again, back with another relationship story. In this video, a mother loses her child because her mother-in-law does not believe in allergies. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is a mother-in-law revenge story. So I, 26 male, and my fiance, 28 female, are staying at my mother-in-law's 57 female house for a couple of weeks. Little to say that after a couple of days of being her best, she started to make our stay here a living hell. She is always complaining, always angry, and criticizing anything we do. We wanted to make her a nice meal the other day. Our hobby is cooking, and she already ate that food made by us once she was in visit to us, and she loved it. We made the exact same food, but now she started complaining that it tastes weird and that she better orders food to herself. Anyways, because she came up with the idea that she's too busy to cook, we should cook the next meal, but only the way she asks us to. I started cooking and she gave very strict orders, micromanaging everything. She clearly has time for that. The funny thing was that she said, "This is the way a real name of the food is made." But believe me, the stuff she put in it, I never heard anyone cook it like this. At one point she gave me a jar of pickle lard and told me that I should put it in the dish to add more fatty taste. When I opened the jar, a very rancid smell hit me and I realized that the lard has gone bad, but decided to go with it and I put it on the meal. Orders are orders. After the food was ready, I quickly told my fiance, who knew about this and thought that this is a very good revenge, and we went out to eat our lunch in a restaurant. When we came back, my mother-in-law was furious and said that her meal is unedible, and what did I put into it? I said absolutely only what she asked me to, and she was there to witness it. I took a spoonful and it was absolutely disgusting. Then I used the reverse Uno card and started complaining about the dish she told me to make, that it tastes weird and that I know how to cook better meals. Her face said it all though. I hope she won't complain about our cooking anymore. And the next one is the title story, which is also about a crazy mother-in-law, but it is much more serious. And it also involves a kid dying, and even though it is not graphic, I just want to warn you in advance. So I have a story that I want to share with everyone. I warn you now that this is not going to be the sort of story some of you will want to hear, but I ask you to listen anyway, for the sake of my baby that passed away a little while ago. If for nothing else but to keep her memory alive, and that way I hope that she can live on in the hearts of other caring, compassionate parents, or to provide some comfort to those who have also lost a baby. So me, 39 male, and my wife, 32 female, have been together since we met in college, and we always knew that we were gonna start a family when we were ready, when our education was done, when our careers were at a stable point, and we felt like we were financially stable enough to be able to give our children the best start in life. After being together for about 10 years, we decided that we were ready to have children. I was a successful freelancer with a myriad of trusted clients, and my wife was a nurse. Because I worked from home, I would be a sort of stay-at-home dad. We had it all planned out and we were ready to put a little mini us into the world. Now, leading up to this point was no smooth sailing either, all due in part for my mother-in-law. She was absolutely baby crazy. From the minute me and my wife got married, all we would ever get from the mother-in-law is, "When are you having kids?" And "Are you planning on having any kids anytime soon? I really want to be a grandmother. Hurry up and have kids already." It was so annoying, it even came to the point where I could see my wife getting visibly distressed from her mother's constant nagging, and I snapped. "Will you stop?" I practically shouted at my mother-in-law, and she got all defensive like I was the bad guy. My wife thanked me later, saying that if I had not shouted at her, she would have done it herself, and it would have been 1,000 times worse because it was her mother. So basically, you can see the sort of stress we were under. I almost decided that I didn't want to have kids in the end just to spite the old woman. Obviously, we eventually did have a child, our first most beautiful and special little angel, who will always hold a dear place in our hearts. We called her Erin, and she was perfect. The first thing I did after holding her for hours, staring into her silvery grey eyes, was to take a picture of her holding my thumb. Her hand was so small, she could not even grasp the entire tip of my thumb. Her little thumb was the same size as the nail on my pinky. She was perfect. As the months went by, Erin slowly started to wean herself off of breast milk and try more substantial foods. We did not want to give her baby food from the shops. Who knows what stuff they stick in it? I know they say that it's all organic foods, but I trust major corporations about as far as I can spit. So we would whiz up some food in the blender until it made a rather gross looking paste and feed that to Erin. Now you might be thinking, I'm pulling your leg, but you have absolutely absolute favorite was mashed sprouts. Trust me, her nappies after she ate sprouts were a biological hazard of the most extreme. When you start weaning a baby onto regular foods, you always hear horror stories about being careful of allergies, the worst one being, as I'm sure most people are aware, peanut allergies. They are fatal. When we tested Erin for allergies, we had a sample of all the most hazardous foods that people are well known for having allergies to, the car ready to go at a moment's notice, shoes on, coats on, the works. We started with the simple foods first: citrus fruits, shellfish, seafood, milk, eggs, wheat and soybeans. While Erin had a little redness around her mouth from citrus, she was fine with everything else, but then came the mother of all allergies: peanuts. Of the 150 annual infant deaths from allergies that occur every year, peanuts are responsible for around 100 of those. We are not taking any chances. You don't need to get your child to eat peanuts to see if they have a peanut allergy. While you can, there's no guarantee that you'll be able to get to the hospital in time. What you should do is ask for a home lab test. The hospital will send you a little packet for you to take a sample of the child's blood, then you send it off. A few days to a couple of weeks later, depending on how busy they are, you get the results back telling you if your child has a peanut allergy or not. And well, sadly, Erin did have a nut allergy. From then on, anytime Erin was being looked after by anyone but me and my wife, we would tell them no nuts. A very strict rule, but then in steps good old mother-in-law. Grandma knows best, right? Her generation knew how to raise strong, hardy children after all. Doesn't listen to anyone because she raised 6 children all of her own. One evening me and my wife decide to have a date night. We have not gone out just the two of us since Erin was conceived, so we decide that it was high time to get the romance going again. The only available babysitter is the mother-in-law. We are very strict with her about the do's and don'ts, and we are very clear that she is not to have any peanuts, and if she does manage to eat something with nuts in it, that there was an EpiPen. It'll be fine, we never had these problems when I was growing up, none of my kids had allergies. Well, nothing she said filled me with any confidence, and I went over again and again what to do if Erin had an allergic reaction. It almost came to the point where I wanted to cancel the evening and wait until we could find someone else, but I went anyway. The worst decision I ever made. I tried to enjoy the evening, and for a while I did actually let loose and finally enjoy some alone time with my wife in a crowded restaurant. Well, a couple hours later we get home and immediately I can hear Erin in distress and the mother-in-law doing her best to calm her down. I ask what's happening and the mother-in-law simply tells me that Erin is just being fuzzy. I can tell instantly that something was wrong. She was wheezing quite badly and she had hives coming up and around her mouth. All the symptoms of an allergic reaction. I'm furious, but more so, I'm scared out of my wits. I'm reaching for the EpiPen and give Erin a dose. My wife is screaming at her mother, asking her what she had done. I just gave her a little peanut butter. It's good for her, got plenty of protein. She's fine, she's just being fuzzy. You were the same when you were a child. I couldn't believe it. This woman was so arrogant that she had put my little girl in danger. The first EpiPen didn't help, so I injected a second and we rushed to the hospital. I was running red lights, speeding, I didn't care. We went straight in through A+E and seeing my daughter in distress, the nurses immediately got her cared for. Those moments pacing outside the hospital room were the absolute worst, not knowing what was gonna happen, no one telling us anything because they were too buzzed trying to save Erin's life. When the doctor came out after an hour, I could immediately tell by the look on his face that the news was bad. He didn't even have to say anything, I broke down there and then. Me and my wife slumped in the middle of the hospital floor, trying to console each other while grieving. Mother-in-law was charged with neglect, child cruelty, and infanticide. She got sentenced to 18 years in prison, and I never saw her again. We laid Erin to rest, and for a long time me and my wife did not want to have children, but we went to so many counseling sessions and after a few years we were now finally ready to have another child. However, I wanted to tell this story first so that Erin would live on forever. And here, Ripe Stars, I gotta say, that was such a sad story, but it's good to hear that the mother-in-law hopefully won't see the light of day again anytime soon. Also, I think from the wording and also the consequences for infanticide, as OP told it, I suppose the story took place in the United Kingdom. Either way, the next one is a more light-hearted malicious compliance story. So the previous job, I worked in a company that was regulated by multiple powerful government agencies. When they asked for something, they wanted it pronto, and if the delay was too long, they would rather have us shut down business rather than wait for data information or prototypes. I was given a company phone that I had to take everywhere with me, rotating on call periods, but I'm expected to be available if crap hits the fan. The phone was a special kind of phone from a fruit company based in California. It was not a US-based model, it had 2 different networks with some extra tech in it. Could jump on whichever was stronger and maybe even use both at the same time. I'm not sure, but it was good. Needless to say, it should have been pretty expensive. Now, I love nature, I can and have gone camping, oftentimes in remote places, and gone a few days without seeing another human. 18 months into the job, there was a new schedule where I got 3 days of being on call and expected to work a regular 8-hour day, having to live within 20 minutes of work and then 4 days of being off. This worked pretty amazing for me. As soon as next on-call team doing and maintaining the same work from our department got on, I would be off on a plane to get another national park under my belt or some remote state parks or whatever I had my sight on. Honestly, I thought it would be helpful to carry the company phone I was given along with me in case I was needed. In the year and a half, I was never even contacted when not being on call, as we had a strong culture of communications and the teams knew what they had to know in order to troubleshoot. Nevertheless, I took the company phone along with me. During the trip, the screen got damaged, not so much that the phone was inoperable, but definitely difficult to use. Got back, went through the forms and got IT to repair or give me another one. Some manager high up in IT went off and was going on and on and on about how expensive those devices were, how difficult it was to configure them, and how much harder it was to get them in the US and all other BS. Then she told me I'm not to take the company phone and hardware along with me wherever I go. It is supposed to go between my residence and the office and nowhere else. And she was pretty derogatory about it, even throwing a few large chunks of racism in between. I shot off an email later, keeping my manager in the loop and the department head about confirming what she said. Then cue my malicious compliance. A few weeks later, I took my PTO. PTO policy was pretty good, and thus I took off for 3 weeks and still had over 3 weeks remaining. I did not take any of the company hardware along with me, as per what was stated by some manager who was somewhere in the org chart in IT and decently high up. All hands on deck situation arose. My manager was pissed at me not being able to answer the company phone. Was not like I was in the woods at my very dear cousin who had just twins and had a very difficult delivery. I took care of my cousin while her husband looked after the kids. Manager had to get me on my phone, and she had to go through some of my work friends for my personal phone, since I was pretty good at not giving out my personal contact info to people at work. Manager, why are you not answering the company phone? Me, I'm not at home, I don't have my company phone with me. Manager, never mind, get back online immediately. We have all hands on deck situation. Me, sorry, I don't have any of the company hardware with me. Manager being mouthy. Why? A bunch of expletives following. Me, this manager in IT said I was not to take company hardware along with me, wherever I go. Manager, what? When did that happen? Me, I sent an email stating what she said and kept you and X, our department head, in CC. Manager goes through her email, finds it and a bunch more expletives. You need to come back immediately. Me, sorry, no can do. Meanwhile, my cousin is still pretty much half dead with a very difficult twin pregnancy. I'm taking care of her and I was pretty clear about it before going on PTO. I would not be able to come back. Manager then cuts off the call and calls me back in 30. Manager, do you have anyone who has keys to your apartment? Me, yeah. Manager, give me their contact. I'm going to get the computer and a screen and UVW, other hardware, shipped to you before night and you can get back. We have a serious situation. Me, can I get more PTO then to compensate for this intrusion? Me, knowing that I have the slightly upper hand and striking when the metal is hot, manager said, sure, I will send an email approving this. By 8 PM, I get my company phone, computer and other hardware shipped to me, and I also get 2 emails, one email approving the extended PTO for this intrusion. Then a second email from my department head X stating that the original company policy is still in effect. In fact, a new policy has been put in place for some employees to have their company hardware with them, even on PTO. Anything else said by anyone else was to be disregarded, and cherry on top, that IT manager was in CC. When I then returned from my PTO, that IT manager was nowhere to be seen. It turns out she had been demoted, she couldn't digest that, and then quit. The company had to spend over $6,000 to ship it on the same day and get the hardware to me. Either way, the next one is titled, Am I the Jerk Here? My husband, 33, and I, 30 female, are selling our house that we purchased 8 years ago. We currently have it listed for 35k more than what we purchased it for, due to all the renovations and upgrades we put into it. Everything on the inside is brand new and was done in the last year and a half, with special order carpet, furnace, hot water tank and kitchen backslash going in just 2 months ago. The only thing we did not add to the home was a garage, detached, as we chose to have a large backyard instead, although the electrical work is in place as well as the permits should whoever purchases it decide to build one. We do have 2 parking stalls behind our house though on our property, not street parking. Our realtor messaged us with a viewing request at 5:30 to 6, which we agreed to, so we packed our kids up as well as our dog and then left. We got back home at 6:30 only to find them still on our house. I apologized and instantly went back outside while my husband took the kids to the park. Now we are working with a realtor and not selling independently, as we don't want to deal with the people viewing our homes personally. While I was outside waiting for them to finish up, this woman and her husband came out to ask me questions like what the cost for a garage would be. I told them an approximate price and she starts laughing, asking me how we could list our house so high when they would still have to pay 20k or more for a garage. I told her we made the decision to put that kind of money to upgrade the interior of our house, as a garage was never a need for us. She then got annoyed and began saying she would not pay more than 320k for our house, which was less than what we purchased it for. I told her I would never agree to that this conversation was over, and that if she had any more questions then her realtor could reach out to mine. She began arguing with me again, so I snapped and asked why she was wasting everyone's time, as our listing clearly stated there was no garage, but that I would gladly put one in, but would be bumping up my listing by another 30k. She freaked out and said that it would put our place out of her price range, so I told her not to bother looking at places priced above her means and to get off my property. She left crying because of how rude I was to her, and her husband called me a witch. My husband thinks I could have ended the conversation more eloquently, but I feel like she crossed the line by questioning me in the first place. So Reddit, am I the a-hole? And yeah, dear Ripe Stars, please let me know in the comments what you think about this. Do you think that OP acted like an a-hole here and is potentially the a-hole, or not? Someone on Reddit said, not the a-hole. The whole, she wouldn't pay more than 320k for our house, is the kind of thing you say to your realtor, not the sellers. You did not say anything untruthful or even rude, honestly. It's sad that she cannot afford your house. Not really. She's just being ridiculous about it. Comment number 2, her husband is an a-hole. You chose realtor-based sale for a reason, and it was rude to stay past the allotted time. And now, Ripe Stars, we have an update to the story, and it reads like this. No, my realtor was not on site, as it's not common practice where I live to have the seller's realtor there unless they are the ones personally doing the showing. An interested buyer realtor reaches out to him to request a showing, which is arranged upon our approval, and he then provides them with the code to the lockbox on our front door. Their realtor was there initially, as I saw him when I had come home. I then left to our back alley with my dog while my husband took the kids across the street to the park. I'm assuming they had left all together, and when their realtor drove off they came around to the back to start questioning me. For those of you asking why I came home when I should have looked for their cars in my driveway, the truth is I have no driveway. It's all street parking and the cars in front of my house belong to my neighbors. We came back 30 minutes after the viewing was supposed to end, and my realtor had received no notification that they were there past the appointed time. Either way, the next one is titled, Entitled Neighbor Karen Destroys My Fence and Claims that she owns half of my property. So this one starts like this. Moving into my new house was supposed to be an exciting new chapter in my life. I had just gotten married and my wife and I were eager to start building our lives together in this charming little neighborhood. Most of the residents seemed friendly and welcoming when we first arrived. Well, all except for one woman who lived in the house next door. The first sign of trouble arose on the very day we moved in. As the moving truck pulled up with all our belongings, this nosy middle-aged lady came marching over from next door. Without even introducing herself, she just stood there with her arms crossed, glaring at us. "You better not be making too much noise," she snapped. "I won't tolerate any loud music or parties going on next door." Taken aback by her rude behavior right off the bat, I simply muttered that we would just be unloading some boxes and furniture. "See that you keep it down," she huffed before stomping back to her house. My wife and I exchanged bemused glances. Who was this crabby woman? Little did we know then that this was just a hint of the nightmare neighbor we would soon come to know as Karen. Over the next few weeks, I tried my best to avoid Karen whenever I could. If I saw her watering her lawn, I would dash into the house. If she was getting her mail, I would wait in the car until she went back inside. Her glares and disapproved frowns were enough to ruin my day. But one afternoon, the confrontation I'd been dreading finally happened. I was doing some gardening out in my front yard when I heard the screech of an opening screen door. Karen marched straight towards me, wagging her finger. "Just what do you think you're doing?" she demanded. I blinked at her, baffled. Gardening? "Don't play dumb with me," she yelled. "You're clearly trying to claim part of my yard." Now I was totally confused. "What are you talking about?" She jabbed her finger at the fence separating our two front yards. "That fence is on my property line. You have no right to be planting things on my side." I tried to explain calmly that I was not planting anything on her side of the fence, but she refused to listen. "I knew you would be trouble ever since you moved in," she raved. "People like you don't belong in this neighborhood." People like me? I was stunned by her openly racist comment about my ethnicity, but before I could respond, she stormed off, shouting over her shoulder that she would be calling the cops. Sure enough, a few minutes later, a squad car pulled up in front of my house. I tried to explain to the officer that I had not done anything wrong, but Karen kept shrieking that I was trying to steal her land. No matter what I said, the officer believed her over me. "Look, I think this is all just a misunderstanding," the officer said, "but I have to take her accusation seriously, so I suggest you stay on your own property from now on." I couldn't believe it. This crazy woman had fabricated some story about me trespassing, and the cops had simply taken her word for it. Over the next few weeks, Karen became more and more unbearable. Every time I went into my backyard, she would come out yelling that I was on her property. She even destroyed the fence separating our yards, claiming it was hers so she could do whatever she wanted with it. One day I came home to find a work crew in my backyard cutting down the big oak tree back there. When I ran out yelling for them to stop, the foreman waved a piece of paper and said that he had been hired by the owner of the property to remove the tree. I quickly figured out that Karen must have pulled another scam, claiming to own part of my yard. That oak tree had huge sentimental value for my wife and I. We had even hung a swing from it. Watching it get cut down crushed me. I felt so violated and powerless. That is when I decided enough was enough. I installed security cameras covering my entire property line. If Karen was gonna keep playing this game, I was gonna collect evidence against her. Sure enough, 2 days later, I checked the footage and saw Karen sneaking into my backyard with a pair of clippers. She started snipping away at my prized rose bushes that I had planted near the property line. I raced outside and yelled at her to stop. She had the audacity to claim she was pruning her rose bushes on her property. When I told her I had video proof of what she was doing, she slapped me across the face. I immediately called the cops and showed them the footage of Karen trespassing and destroying my garden. But as soon as the officers approached her, she burst into tears and accused me of assaulting her. The police tried to tell me that they had to follow up on her accusation, even though I was the one who called them. Once again, they seemed to take her word over mine. She continued wailing about me being a threat and insisted that they arrest me. But I remembered the camera pointed at my front door. I showed the officers footage of Karen slapping me first before I ever touched her. The officers reviewed the video and finally had no choice but to admit that Karen was at fault here. They asked if I wanted to press charges for trespassing and destruction of property. I have to admit, it felt pretty good watching Karen scream and curse as the handcuffs locked around her wrists. She gave me a look of absolute hatred as the police took her away. I just smiled and waved. At long last, Karen had faced real consequences for her harassment. And I had evidence on multiple tapes to get a restraining order against her as well. I realized then that I refused to be intimidated by a bully. After a long legal battle, Karen was sentenced to 6 months in prison for her antics. The judge also ruled that the property line was exactly where I said it was based on the surveys. A peaceful couple bought Karen's old house and I finally got to enjoy my home. So the moral of the story is, don't let entitled Karens walk all over you, stand up for yourself and use every legal option available. The justice system does still work sometimes. Karen thought she could bully me off my own land and call the cops with wild stories, but in the end her lies caught up with her. I just wish I could have seen the look on her face when she had to trade her house for a tiny jail cell. And yeah guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. And also check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on Spotify, Amazon, Audible and other podcast platforms. You will often find exclusive episodes and early access to new content. Furthermore, please check out my Patreon by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or my YouTube membership program for even more exclusive stories. Thank you so much, and I will see you again tomorrow.